Sina swali kile kwa bibi yangu.
TB yaweza kuangamiza jamii yako. Usikubali. Matibabu ni bila malipo katika hospitali zote za serikali.
Berlin is calling. The footballing fraternity is taking note. Defending champions RB Leipzig have reached the DFB Pokal final for the third successive season after an emphatic 5-1 win over SC Freiburg.
Dani Olmo, there's no pressure on him, and he's found Nkunku! Ruthless!
Similarly, Eintracht Frankfurt are into the final of the DFB Cup following a 3-2 victory over VfB Stuttgart. The DFB Pokal hits a crescendo on Saturday, 3rd June at 9 p.m. when RB Leipzig will be up against Eintracht Frankfurt live and exclusive on KBC Channel 1. Don't miss out on the unexpected delight.
It is Colomboigny against Bredlo, a battle Colomboigny was never going to lose.
KBC Channel 1, your true sports partner.
Sundowner Sunset Date goes county, this time to the land of opportunities. All roads lead to Embu County. Sundowner will be hosted live from the iconic Isaac Walton Inn with a grand collabo. Catherine Donye and John Obongo Jr., the Wicked Weekend Man, and thereafter John Karani JK will keep you on your feet with hits from the 80s and 90s till late.
Good morning, Mr. Walker.
There will be country music performances by Carrie B, karaoke sessions with Kid Karaoke, and much more fun. No dull moment when Sundowner fans get together. Sundowner Sunset Date Embu County Edition, proudly brought to you by KBC English Service and the Kenya Tourism Board on 3rd June 2023 at the Isaac Walton Inn, starting at 2 p.m. Entry 500 shillings at the gate. Tembea Kenya, Tembea Embu.
Enough with this stupidity. Go back to your house.
You can't tell me what I have to do. And you can't brush me away. Alonso? Alonso, how can you say that I'm lying to her face after all that we've lived through together?
That is not true.
You are a traitor, a liar, a coward.
Just say that you and I have to confront each other. Would you be capable of hurting me? Because I can guarantee you that I could never bring myself to hurt you.
I'm only doing my job, Oligario. Do what you have to do because I don't want to see anybody right now.
Well, you will have to see me. And tell me where you were and who you were with. Why did you come home in that state? Las Bandidas.
Jamani, unajifungia tangu jana. Mwenzako nsharudi hata salamu.
Dad, you know if there's something wrong, you could just tell me.
Yes, baby girl. I'm fine.
Habari za kombo?
Hayuko madam.
Wasiwasi wa nini sasa? Naweza kuwa hata ndio kweli tu. Ananipima akili.
I told you to stay away from this issue.
Pili is my best friend.
I've got to shine, you got to shine. Subhanallah walhamdulillah la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar.
Mwenyezi anasema wala in kafartum, ikiwa mtakufuru neema za Allah, inna adhabi la shadid, hakika adhabu yangu ni nzito, hakuna mtu atakayeweza kuihimili adhabu ya Allah tabaraka wa taala. Aqulu ma tasmaun.
Ikafikia kiwango ambacho na Aisha radhiallahu anha aliweza kumuuliza, hivi mbona wazidisha ibada kwa wingi sana wakati Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala amekujalia neema? Basi Mtume Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam alijibu kwa kuuliza, je, sipaswi kuwa mja mwenye kumshukuru Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ambaye ni Mola wangu?
This meeting is very significant and indeed is a very good opportunity for the world to appreciate the potential that we have as a country, and also to give this the economic space to our micro, small and medium enterprises to create necessary linkages for their products, and also linkages to financing, also linkages even for capacity building. One thing that we'll want to appreciate that the manner in which our economy is designed, or rather our architecture in this country, is that majority of businesses are in MSME. And in that MSME space, majority of our MSMEs also fall at the first M. I call it magical M, that's the micro, and this is due to the high informality of the MSME sector. But the only way to give those people an opportunity to participate effectively is through such kind of exposures. They will get to appreciate that where they reside in whichever corner of this country, the kind of enterprises that are engaged in, be it in agribusiness, be it in value addition, there is a buyer somewhere. So this is a very good forum which will make people appreciate the markets and the great potential that we have in Africa, and also for Kenya, just positioning us as a hub for an emerging market. You've always seen we have been a hub for many years, but many people used just to put us as a hub for develop international communities and transit, but now we want to position ourselves as a hub for economic development. So I think it's going to be very critical because it will create those opportunities for the connectivity and participation of our MSMEs. Kenya for a long time has always been the hub, the international hub. But as I've said, this has come a time now where we are now also capitalizing on that international hub that we've had. You see, for many years we've hosted the UNEP here, UNDP here, UNEP especially UN, UNEP, UN Habitat, and many other international organizations. But again, how we are just geopolitically positioned in itself makes us, also become that center of trade in Africa. So, like I said, we are not just a gateway to the rest of Africa, but also we are a gateway to the markets, both raw material, to the emerging market for raw materials, and also for finished or processed products. So I think Kenya is very central. But again, also is the acceptability and the penetration of technology. look at the various milestones that we made in mobile money technology makes the world appreciate that if it can happen in Kenya, that is any mobile money innovations, it can happen anywhere in the world. So I think it's in great appreciation of that people feel let's come and advance this conversation. But also I want also to think is because of the leadership that we have right now that has placed a lot of focus, a lot of effort on MSME. You will realize that this is the first time since independence that we are having a state department that is focused on MSME growth. And it's just in appreciation of the contribution that this sector does to our economy. Right now, in terms of GDP, you can put it at 20%, but I believe that we have opportunity to even increase it to 80%. And that's why the president keeps on focusing on intervention that can stimulate economic growth or participation of people at the economic pyramid. So I think the environment is very conducive, and it has never been conducive like it is today because of the political goodwill that we are now enjoying in this space. And also because we are able now through this State Department and our ministry to create a coordination platform where all actors, private sectors, government agencies, development partners can meet, read and act from the same script.
Focusing on Africa, why Kenya has outlined an elaborate plan to tap the African market. Good evening and thank you very much for joining us. I have always told you this, that this is the most intelligent program this side of Africa. My name is O'Brien Himani. Tonight on the scorecard, we look at Kenya's effort to widen its base, or what we call the export base in Africa. This is coming at a time when policymakers from more than 35 countries in Africa are meeting here in Nairobi to discuss ways of deepening intra-Africa trade. And statistically speaking, the numbers are low because you're looking at 17% intra-Africa trade. When you compare these with Europe, which is about 70%, then the situation gets murky. What is the way forward? As usual, our team of experts are in the house. They'll be helping us with the numbers and facts. And again, they'll also be making inputs as to how we can do better where we are failing. And as usual, we have Marie Yambo. She's very good at those numbers. She's about to splurge them now on your screen. Marie Yambo, what do you want to tell us tonight?
Thank you so much, O'Brien. And just like you rightfully put it, the Kenya International Investment Conference is coming at a time that trade issues, need to be deepened within the African continent. The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is one of those flagship projects that the African Union has put in place to ensure that trade within Africa, that is inter-trade, is actually upped in Africa. So our topic of the day definitely is gauging Kenya's trade with other African nations. And let's delve into it. And before we get to the numbers, first of all, what is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? So this is a flagship project by the African Union, just like what we have here in the country, Vision 2030. So the African Union also has a blueprint or a flagship project, and one of them is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And just to backtrack a little bit, just to inform you, just apart from the Africa Continental Free Trade Area as one of the flagship projects for the Agenda 2063 by the African Union, we also have the Integrated High-Speed Train Network, which aims to connect all African capitals and commercial centers. Also under the Agenda 2063, there's a formulation of African Commodity Strategy. This is just to transform Africa from a raw material supplier, which Africa does, we actually low on the value adding chain. So there's also the African passport and free movement of people. You cannot talk trade without talking about the free movement of people. And if I just remind you, Kenya and South Africa did remove the visa requirement for its citizens. So right now it's very easy for Kenyans to move to South Africa, or even South Africans to come to Kenya. So those are some of the barriers that are actually in place that is actually hindering into trade within the continent. So again, we look at some of the numbers in as far as trade is concerned, or intertrade is concerned within the African continent. O'Brien had already mentioned about the 17%, very low. What this means is just 17% is what within the African continent, whether export or import, that is what the African continent is doing in as far as trading with it itself at 17%, which means the rest is going out of the African continent. Definitely that is actually hampering the economic development within the continent. Now, if you compare the numbers to other continents, for instance, Asia is trading at 40% within itself. The USA is trading at 60%, while the European Union is trading at 70%, that is export and import. Now, what are some of those barriers that are hindering the intertrade within Africa? Definitely infrastructure is just one of them. If you look at it, 16 African countries are landlocked, which means they have no access to sea or ocean. That means they depend on other countries. For example, our neighbor Uganda is landlocked and has to have its export pass through Kenya before it actually go to other African countries. That in itself is causing a lot of, if I say, blockade. Other countries which are landlocked are like Lesotho. We also have Zambia and Rwanda within the continent. So underdeveloped transport connectivity definitely hampers intertrade and drives up the cost of imports and exports up to 30 to 40%. Now, value-added Kenyan tea, for example, is what the president mentioned yesterday during the opening of the Kenya International Investment Conference. And he said that it took 3 months just for the Kenyan tea to actually arrive at the Tema ports, that is in Ghana. So those are some of the issues that the African Intercontinental Free Trade Area is trying to address if implemented well. Now, the other issue is, what would be then the benefit of implementing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? So a report by the World Bank says that by 2035, if implemented, income gains would actually go up by up to 7%. By 2035, total export would actually increase by almost 29%. Intra-continental export would increase by at least 81%, while exports to non-African countries would go up by around 90%. It would also lift about 30 million people from extreme poverty, 68 million from moderate poverty. So essentially speaking, there are benefits to implementing the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. And so that is going to form the basis of our discussion tonight. Remember, you can interact with us on our social media handle, on Facebook and also on Twitter, where we're asking you, and the question of the day, is the government doing enough to enable Kenyans benefit from the African market? So would like to hear from you tonight, and we'll be able to sample some of your views within this program. O'Brien Kimani, it's back to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Marie Yambo, for taking us through those numbers. And of course, as we say on this show, numbers are statistic. They are stubborn, and statistics do not lie. Those are the numbers that we want to look at. The dream of creating a seamless Africa, a continent made up of 54 or 55 states, depending on where you stand. How can we have a borderless Africa? An African that is trading with itself. And as a country, how do we take advantage of the African continent, which has a population of 1.3 billion people and an economic size which is about $3.4 trillion US? How do we take advantage of that? And you see, the African continent is expected to have about 7 billion people by the year 2050. And so for anybody who's not talking about Africa, then you're just winking in the dark. My name is O'Brien Kimani. This is the scorecard. Tonight, I'm about to unveil my team of experts. The two faces are familiar, but we have a new one. And we're talking about Professor Fred Ogola. He is an economist as well as a governance expert. He's joining us tonight. And Prof, we appreciate your time on the scorecard tonight. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, O'Brien.
Asante. Next to Prof, we have Whitney Misheni, also a regular face on this show. Thank you very much. And I must admit that you're looking quite good, in blue. This is blue, right?
Yes, definitely.
This is blue.
I think so.
This is white. What color? Different shades of blue. Because you're also in blue. Did you know that?
We have no idea.
And next to, you're welcome. And next to Whitney Mishenu, we have Dr. Peter Mbai. He's the head of Ministerial Delivery Unit. This is the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry. He's a seasoned negotiator, and he's joining us tonight to help us put these numbers into perspective and, of course, help us understand what the government is doing to deepen intra-Africa trade. My name, again, as I said, is O'Brien Kimani. At O'Brien Kimani is my Twitter handle. At KBC Channel 1 is, of course, our Twitter handle. Let's now get down to the business of the day. And I want to hear this from Dr. Peter Mbai. What is the government doing to deepen its trade with the rest of Africa?
Thank you so much, and all the viewers who are joining us this evening. It is very simple and very wide. One is that for the last few months, we had to sit down and find where are we first. And all of the things we discovered, among the three things we do in the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, one is investments, that is FDI. Foreign direct investments, what we call ADI, Africa Direct Investments, and DDI, Domestic Direct Investments. This is about encouraging and bringing manufacturers. I want to be very clear. We are not about bringing in from other countries retailers, people who come and compete to do trading that can be done locally. Ours is to bring in manufacturers. That is number one. We have a very ambitious target. Since January, $10 billion US. Kenya has been doing only $500 million US a year in FDIs. So we have a target of $10 billion US by December this year. Where are we? Not very bad. We are at about 20%, 30%. And most of the work has been foundational.
So 30% of what?
Of the 10 billion.
Of the 10
target.
billion.
Yeah.
So you're talking about 3 billion.
3 billion.
USD.
And we hope in the next, because a lot of the work has been foundational. I mean, you have been seeing the CS, moving across most of the countries to look for FDI. Here we have been mobilizing DDI, I mean domestic, getting the domestic people, I mean the local investors also. Number two is the issue of exports. I mean, we have three state departments of industry, trade and industry. So the second issue is the issue of exports. Now, for the last 5 years, about 5 years ago, Kenya was doing a contribution to GDP, exports was doing 30%. It came down to 10%. Now, what does that mean? By exports coming down, it means the issue of the dollar you are talking about. Because when we become an importing country, that's where you get messed up with the dollar. Because you are bringing in, so it's squeezing. But when you manufacture and export, that's when. So some of these cries you hear about dollars, they are natural. It's simply because you are getting a beating by being an importing country instead of exporting. Again, what have the ministry been doing, led by the CS and also, of course, the permanent secretary or the principal secretary of trade, going out there, because trade doesn't just happen. Trade is very, very deliberate. You have to go. What you hear about, bilateral agreements, talking about trade agreements, what do we want to sell and how will it come to your country? Now, that's what has been happening in the ministry. And I can tell you what is happening today in Nairobi. the CS has been sent as a special envoy by the president. When you saw him moving across African countries, sent as a special envoy to meet the presidents, so that we are saying, instead of limiting our market, East Africa is only 250 million population market, but Africa is 1.3 billion. The idea has been very deliberately from the president and of course the Ministry of Investments and Trade is to make sure we expand this market from the 250 billion, for example, line now in East Africa to 1.3 billion in the whole Africa. Now, what's happened today in Nairobi since yesterday is for the African trade ministers coming to ratify, to say, yes, we know our time has come. It's either we come together and trade as a bloc, or we perish trading as individual countries. So what the ministry has been doing is to encourage that trade. What is the purpose? To make sure our goods, they move out to other countries so that this contribution, export contribution to GDP, at least from the 10%, grows to 15 to 20 and back to 30% in 5 years or 7 years. That's what we are doing mainly. And the third thing, of course, just in matter of mentioning, is the issue of industry. O'Brien, I will tell you this. The first revolution we had in this country is the repeal of Section 2A. The second one was the new constitution. The third one is the industrial revolution through manufacturing and value addition that will actually drive this nation to the next level. That is why we have the introduction of county aggregation industrial parks. That's why we have establishment of special economic zones, export processing zones, to make it to be very deliberate. Every region in this country, called a county, will have an opportunity to really compete and tell us, what have you been producing that you want it to be added value for export? It will be for trade internally, trade outside, because when you have aggregation parks, there will be a cold storage section to avoid post-harvest losses, so that you can keep your products there for a few weeks or months as you look for market. Now, the other thing, it will be connected such that if you don't have something in Machakos and somebody else have it in Embu, you can be able to relay. But number two, value addition. And number three, exporting to other. We have something we are calling export trading houses, where we are going to have our own houses in most of the countries in the world, where we are going to trade our products. What are we doing in summary is that to enhance trade. Trade is what will lift us from poverty. We don't mind anything farmers in Kenya produced for subsistence. That is the role of agriculture. Trade comes when you have to take that product and you want to engage it with outside countries because of bringing income to the farmer. That's part of what O'Brien we have been up to.
Prof, you have listened to Dr. Mbai, outlining what the government is doing, and I just want to make a correction. The population of EAC is about 283.7 million people, when you add the 7 countries, and not 250. And so when you listen to Dr. Mbai, the government is very good, at coming up with policies, making statements. But when it comes to follow through, this is where we have always gotten it wrong. Are you convinced that this time around we are getting it right?
Yeah, first of all, O'Brien, you see what's happening in Nairobi is something that I think all of us have to come and support. In fact, what I've been telling Kenyans, and I think this is what we have discussed before, times comes when we must be our own advocates and must be our own ambassadors in discussing it. If you go to social media, I can see some people are taking side by saying, oh, this is just another scam and the rest. Nevertheless, just the meeting itself is enough. But if this meeting do not address the issues which are making this not happening, for example, with this meeting, are there some policies being passed? We need to know which policies are going to be passed in this meeting, or is just a meeting to get to know you? So if it's going to be passing some policies, I think Dr. Mbai will be able to explain which policies will be passed that will ease in this trade. The other thing is about infrastructure. Infrastructure needs investment. And Africans can come with ways on which they can share on how to build infrastructure. It's expensive to build infrastructure. And now that the government seems to have suspended some of the capital investment, so the question is, how will this actually make and facilitate this? The other issues which creates a lot of challenges here are to do, for example, with the ethnic diversity that is in Africa. How will you create linguistic diversity? For example, DRC Congo has been brought into East Africa. That's why the numbers have gone up. Are we going to learn French so that we can trade with the DRC? Will you learn Lingala? Will they learn Swahili? Of course, there's something like also speaking a bit of Swahili there. And the other things which also is important is political instability. We like the fact that President Uhuru Kenyatta, the former president, has been working on how to stabilize the region by being envoy for peace. May this continue, because under political instability, you may find that some flights can be cancelled. Remember last time when something was happening in Sudan, flights were cancelled, KQ could not be able to fly in there, which means that some trade was hit. So we are looking at all these things holistically, and of course the cultural issues. And for me, what I think Dr. Mbai and the team needs to address, there is something very painful in Africa called sibling rivalry. Sibling rivalry is just the fact that other countries consider Kenya to be their brothers and sisters, and Kenya consider them to be their brothers and sisters. They just fight for nothing. And you find, for example, I heard what Dangote said, that his cement are 27 kilometers, the factory, from Benin border. Yet, the Benin government cannot allow the Dangote cement to be taken to Benin, and they import cement from China. And what is the problem with taking cement from Nigeria, which is just in the border, and importing them to Benin? It's just that your neighbor feels you are going to succeed. And you know, these things happen from the family, whereby sibling rivalry can just make families not succeed. And I think that this is what Africa needs to come from. I think for me, those are very, very touching issues, rather than Kenya looking for intra-personal policies they want to do. If their policies are not being bought in South Africa, they're not being bought in Tanzania, for example, do you know how much Kenyan business tend to fail in Tanzania, yet South African business tend to succeed in Tanzania more than Kenyan business are doing in Tanzania? Look at last time when Safaricom appointed an MD from Safaricom to become an MD in Tanzania, in Tanzania, it didn't go through. It's just because of reasons to do with the policy. So I agree that for me, the most important thing that need to do is policy environment need to improve, infrastructure need to be more vibrant, but we need to change mindset, because changing mindset is more difficult than building infrastructure, O'Brien.
What about you, Ms. Shani?
Thank you, O'Brien, and also a good evening to your viewers. Thank you for that question. When we look at Africa, we know that Africa is experiencing a youth bulge, meaning there are a lot of young people. Majority of the Africans are in their are under 35 years old, and also Africa has huge potential because they have minerals that are still yet to be explored. So we come to now we domesticate this to what is the government doing to increase the Kenya and Africa trade. What's the role of government? The role of government is to provide a conducive environment for trade. When you look at the conducive environment, we're also looking at tax policies. What taxes is the government implementing? Are they punitive? Is there a stable environment when it comes to taxes? Meaning, are they predictable or are they erratic? Meaning, does the government just impose taxes willy-nilly, like annually or something like that? Is there predictability or not? Secondly, we also come to the issue of bureaucracy. When we are facilitating trade, we want to ask, is there a lot of red tape when people are going through trade within other, be it the East African community or also other nations in Africa? Thirdly, we come to infrastructure, as Prof has said. Is the government investing in communication? Is it investing in the cost or in power? We've also seen the cost of power has also increased, and that deals with infrastructure. Is the government investing in road? Is it investing in railways? Is it investing in other infrastructural investments? Also, when we're coming to asking if the government is doing a good job in facilitating trade within Kenya and Africa, we ask ourselves, what's the ease of doing business in Kenya, and also what's the cost of production of products in Kenya, meaning be it taxes, be it, as I've said, the bureaucracy, is there political goodwill to ensure that Kenya is exporting more, and also just to ensure that there's trade balance between Kenya and other nations in Africa.
O'Brien, just to add, there's something about the currency. If you want to go to DRC and you want to do trade there, you cannot change the Kenya shillings from DRC. You have to change it here. And the issue of inconsistent currencies in Africa is a challenge. Do you know that American finds easier to trade in DRC Congo than you as Kenya? Because actually DRC seems to be a dollarized economy. So we are looking at this thing happening also across East Africa. When I was doing my degree in Uganda, you could easily get Kenya shillings be accepted even directly to buy something with it. But some countries, you find Kenya shillings may not be accepted. Of course, you see how how the US has been able to dollarize the world. Why don't Kenya maybe try to look for how they can Kenya shilling the world? I don't know whether that is a good way to put it.
Actually, the president yesterday mentioned that there's going to be an integrated payment system in Africa, which is called the Pan-African Payment System, which all African countries can, make the local. They can pay with their local currencies and to avoid the dollar situation.
You see, and I think he's bringing in a very interesting conversation. Since 2015, the African continent has been talking about a common currency. And the plan was to have a common currency by the year 2019. Of course, that has failed. The president yesterday was talking about, and he asked a very relevant question. Why do we need the dollar when we are trading in Africa? Okay? And we are seeing a wave of de-dollarization in the world. It has started with China, with Russia. Now it's and so many countries are now opting to do country tradings, or government-to-government trades, whereby, we can buy gas. For example, Kenya has signed an agreement with Saudi Arabia and UAE, where they will be buying Saudi Arabian oil and UAE oil using the Kenya shilling. And so it seems like, all of a sudden now countries are realizing that, the dollar somehow is also putting a barrier to trade. And so I want to hear from you, and in regard to the point that he is raising here, what efforts are we doing, from our end to ensure that we deal with some of these barriers of trade?
I hear you, Aubrey. And for example, when you say that it has been work that has started, I agree with the Prof. There has been a lot of, because of what I would call lack of what I call a common vision. When people look very small to their own territories, these are the problems that happen. However, we want to be very positive. If you look at what happened since COVID, and the president alluded to it, that Africa was the last continent to get vaccines. So Africa is beginning to think, wait a minute, where are we in the global map? Where are we in the African geopolitics? Where are we positioned? So some things like that epidemic is beginning to show people, look, can we begin thinking Africa? So whatever would have taken many years to happen then, you can see some what I would call awareness. Now, it is not very easy. Ministers sometimes meet, of course, in their meetings. But the kind of move, getting over 30 countries plus, and others are still alive in. Because you see, after the yesterday's launch, today and tomorrow, the ministers are meeting in Nairobi for 2 straight days, 48 hours plus, just to come and agree, go 1.1 on what you are calling the policies on the future. So I want to be very positive and say, yes, there was some bit of reluctance, operating like, we are sovereign, but they are discovering it's not helping. Because if you look at Africa, China is 1.1 plus or minus, population. That has been growing to 1.25, like something like that. Africa today is about 1.3 billion, going to 1.4. Now, but China, because of being one, they occupy the highest seats in the world map. Africa, look at the USA. Look at Africa, 1.3. But because of being segmented, we are taking advantage of. So what are we saying? It could have been a problem then. Look at the Ukraine war. Look at what has happened with Russia. It's hitting Africa more and fast. So there is an awakening where people are saying, yes, and again, I like the president came out very strongly. I mean, go out there on my behalf. Talk to these presidents. Tell them I'm in it. This is what we want to do. And that's why we had to get, we got the president of AU coming just for six hours, landing in the morning, leaving after the meeting. And so what we are looking at something happen. Now, I'll mention something you mentioned about hindrances a bit. And policies are picked to, which you have actually picked, and I think it's being one, the issue of visa. And I remember we engaged and we said, why can't we be the big brother? Some people would say, Kimani, why don't you push for reciprocity? That if we are opening up visa, we need to tell countries which countries are ready also to do the same. We said no. Lies above. Say it's done. Let them see Kenya is already the push the president have been having of Pan-Africanism, the push the CS has been having of going out there literally, camping there and saying I've been sent. We are saying, can you take another move to say, in the view on the day of this conference, where we are meeting here, we want to say that we are magnanimous enough. We are saying, let it go. That shows leadership. And of course, the PAPS one.
Let me ask you this, Daktari. I mean, and I like the fact that you're bringing in the issue of visa. You know, when you look at the African continent, the number of African countries that can come to Kenya visa-free, they are about 15. And you have a continent that has about 55 states. So you still have about 40 countries in Africa that will require a visa to come to Kenya. How fast do we plan to do away with this requirement for our brothers and sisters in Africa?
I think the message from the president yesterday was very clear. It is as good as done. Because he told the guests, I'm sorry that you had to get visas. Next time you are coming here, you may not have to do it. In short, what the president was saying...
And you're saying you may?
That's what the president was saying. Is we are just waiting for legal frameworks of, you know, the issues of now formalities to be done.
Has it started?
I can tell you from where I sit, we are waiting for what you would call, you know, there's those instruments he must sign. That's why he said, you may, as soon, because somebody may come next week but one. So it's something which the president is going to pronounce himself properly to make it. Of course, you don't want a president making what you would call outside light. But I can tell you, there is every move, I can tell you that internally, to remove visa requirement. Look at countries, some countries, I mean, we are not the first, I mean, in other countries, where you can walk in 185 countries, no visa requirements across the world. Now, we want to be that country in Africa. We want to lead. Of course, what happens is that looking at other issues like security and all that, there's going to be have like 5 or 10 across the world, 5 or 10 to 15, you know, exemptions because of other factors.
Very good.
But for in good faith, I can tell you today here seated, in the good faith of this intra-trade in Africa, visa, Kenya, you are going to get into Kenya without visa.
Very well.
That is a pronouncement.
Prof, because we need to go for a quick break, I'm giving you 30 seconds to respond to what Dr.
You see, first of all, that we must also be balanced here, because sometimes opening up too much can also bring other risks. Because remember that there's a linkages between Kenya and other countries. For example, it used to be very easy to get a visa to UK, but when some other countries found that other nationals could come to Kenya and then get a visa from Kenya to go to theirs, they added restrictions. So visa is something which is interrelational with other things. So sometimes you can open up your borders too much, and that can expose you. At the same time, America is one of the highest visited countries in the world, and entering there, their visa restrictions are very high. So just opening up your borders and making visa free necessarily doesn't mean you have quality people coming, because if I find some people are coming for things which are not adding value. So value addition in their visit must also be checked.
And that's why, I mean, Dr. was talking about, putting the necessary policies in place to ensure that you attract the best in Africa. Well, you're watching The Scorecard. We're live from Broadcasting House. We're taking our first break. Thereafter, we're back with more conversation. And of course, remember our question of the day. Marie Yambo will be on the scoreboard with more information.
Beating the world every day on selected matches. Make a decision. Mozart Bet.
And now there are just 2 teams left. The cup holders take on Eintracht Frankfurt.
What a header! Danny Olmo!
The Red Bulls.
Antika!
Against the Eagles. It's all or nothing time.
It's Szoboszlai again!
Kick-off on June 3rd.
Kamada!
There can only be one winner.
Colomwani!
What a night for RB Leipzig!
Leipzig-Frankfurt, the DFB Cup final.
자, 그럼 우리 형사님 각 나오도록 기도합시다. 오, 주님, 형사님의 각을 붙잡고 있는 마귀들을 내쫓아주옵소서.
잘생겼는데 아주. 아니 근데 그냥 가는 건지 가서 인사도 드려야 돼. 저희 좀 도와주십시오. 한없이 연약한 어린 대학들입니다. 신부님, 제발 좀.
Sundowner Sunset Date goes county, this time to the land of opportunities. All roads lead to Embu County. Sundowner will be hosted live from the iconic Isaac Walter Inn with their grand collabo. Catherine Donye and John Obongo Jr., the Wicked Weekend Man, and thereafter John Karani JK will keep you on your feet with hits from the 80s and 90s till late.
Good morning, Mr. Walker.
There will be country music performances by Carrie B. Karaoke sessions with Kid Karaoke and much more fun. No dull moment when Sundowner fans get together. Sundowner Sunset Date Embu County Edition, proudly brought to you by KBC English Service and the Kenya Tourism Board on 3rd June 2023 at the Isaac Walton Inn, starting at 2 p.m. Entry 500 shillings at the gate. Tembea Kenya, Tembea Embu.
You're watching us live from Broadcasting House. Our conversation today revolves around Kenya's quest to nudge its trade with the rest of Africa, bearing in mind that Africa is becoming the next frontier of trade. Marie Yambo has some interesting information on the screen. Marie Yambo, kindly take us through what the people are saying.
Indeed, O'Brien, remembering that our question of the day was, is the government doing enough to enable Kenyans benefit from the African market? Well, a lot of interesting reactions here. Maybe some of them I'll not be able to put on air. But Mohamed Kasim Dirie says yes. So he's agreeing that the government is doing enough to actually, for Kenyans to benefit from the African market. But Bruce Veronica is saying what the government is doing is opening new investment opportunities in Africa, but its citizens are not equipped to be competitive in those new markets. Now, Joseph Supeo says seriously no. Phyllis Papa also says no. So those are some of the reactions that we're getting from our social media platforms and from our viewers. So I would say keep your comments coming on our Facebook, KBC, Channel 1 TV, and also on Twitter. We will still be sampling some of your comments. Is the government doing enough to enable Kenyans access markets in the African continent? That is the question of the day, and would like to hear from you. So Brian, let's continue the discussions.
Very good indeed. Let's continue with the conversation here. Peter Mbai, doctor, is talking about, the initiatives that the government has put in place. And one of them is rethinking the visa requirement for a number of African countries. But the question that is coming through is then, if we were to open up our borders, for Africans just to come to Kenya without visa restrictions, then the question is, how do you screen and ensure that you're, number one, getting the right people into the continent, and number two, how do you do things in a controlled environment so that you also don't upset your visa agreements with other countries? That is a question that I'd want to hear from Bai. But before we get to hear that from Bai, first of all, Whitney, do you think it's a good idea, for Kenya to lift a blanket or to issue or to say that for any African country willing to visit Kenya, you are going to do so visa-free?
Thank you, O'Brien. I do believe there must be some... I think the president did say that he was opening up the borders visa-free for anyone who was coming in to engage in business. But I do believe that there must be some restrictions within Kenya so that we ensure that people who are actually coming to do legitimate business and not illegal and also illegitimate trade are the ones who are coming to Kenya. But I also do pose that as we are talking about Kenya and African trade, I do believe I laud the president for also taking up this conversation in a very spirited manner. But I have to say it on air that I'm very skeptical about Africa and how Africa is going about the inter-Africa trade. I do believe that Africa is, and as we speak right now, Africa is experiencing a new scramble for Africa. We have, as I said in my opening statement, that Africa has many mineral resources, but we're also saying that the people who are coming in to explore those mineral resources in an illegal way are many countries from the West, many countries from the East are coming into countries like DRC to do illegal trade there, meaning I do not think that there's enough political will from some of these nations to actually ensure that there is proper trade going on between our borders. Secondly, when it comes to infrastructure, we have countries in Central Africa where there are absolutely no networks. For example, right now, if I want to export something to, be it Central African Republic or the Congo, I probably have to go to, I have to ship my things to Europe so that they can come back and go to Central African Republic because there's absolutely no investment in infrastructure. Thirdly, I can also say that Africa is still experiencing a lot of conflicts, a lot of wars. I do not think that they have matured yet to the place where we are saying that economic trading blocks are the ones which are taking center stage. We have seen conflicts going on in Sudan. We've seen DRC. We've also seen Ethiopia, meaning I do believe that Africa still has a very a long way to go when it comes to inter-Africa trade and realizing the Agenda 2063. Thirdly, fourthly, I do not believe that Africa is investing a lot in digital economy. I think Kenya, South Africa, Ghana, and probably some countries in the North Africa are the ones who are investing in the digital economy. But the rest of the African states are experiencing poor leadership, poor governance. So they are yet to mature to the place where we can talk about proper trade, proper cross-border trade, without talking about these challenges that we are still going through, which dates back to the 1960s, and as I've said, there are some colonial powers which are still very active. For example, France is still very active in the central part of Africa.
But I also want to disabuse a common notion that and you are perpetuating the same here, that Africa is always at conflict. And the fact of the matter is, out of the 55 states that we have in Africa, it's only about 6 of them that are having internal conflict. And so you have about 49 countries that are not in any conflict with anyone.
But my whole issue is this, like we look at the war in Sudan, the war in DRC, they're not instigated internally. These are external powers which are coming to stage the battlefronts. The third World War, the battlefront is in Africa, meaning there's absolutely no way you can say that 6 countries is not affecting the region in a large way, and it's external powers which are coming to stage wars in here.
And I think what you are now plunging into is global geopolitics and how Africa is also somehow becoming a playground for Western conflicts. But let's first of all leave that aside, because our conversation today is how Kenya can deepen its intra-Africa trade. And I want to hear from you, Daktari. So how does the government plan to open up our borders, to other Africans to come and trade in Kenya without, number one, hurting, some of our nascent industries, and number two, without flooding Kenya with job seekers. And we know for sure that we are battling with a crisis of unemployment in this country.
Thank you. One, and we want to be very categorical, and I said that in the beginning. We are encouraging manufacturers. We are encouraging FDI, direct investment, so that there is what we call technology transfer. There are jobs for young people. That's something which we have made it very clear with the support of even to the highest level. As a ministry, as a government, we want to be so diplomatic in telling people we don't want people who can come do trading, who can come do retailing. That is not our policy, because we have enough of people who can do that. Actually, we want them to come with their machines, equipment. We are giving them land in our special economic zones, and I want to touch quickly what she mentioned. We are telling investors, look, if you come to our special economic zones, there is lower power, and I want to give this an example. Naivasha special economic zone today, power is 5 cents, gazetted by the government of Kenya. In our EPZs, power has been gazetted at 10 cents. The normal is 20, right? So what are we saying? There are so many incentives when you come to controlled areas to do production. In the 47 CAIPs, we have the same things: incentives, loyalties, taxes, and all that. So that is a very deliberate effort we are making. In the next few days, and these are things already that have come. The number of investors we have gotten so far. These are people who have come and say, I want to put up a modern, factory, for example, to produce vaccines for the whole of Africa, $500 million US. Those are the kind of things we want to do. But so we are very much aware of what you call cost of production. And you mentioned about taxes, about that. So what are we doing? Is that to tell investors, come through the front door, come and meet our Kenya Investment Authority, come and meet our Ministry of our State Department of Investment. We'll take care of you. We have a dedicated desk for post-care. Once we cross a deal, they come. We look to clear them of all the regulatory issues, paperwork and all that, to make sure that they are satisfied. And we have an open. We are launching the next 1 or 2 months. The minister is going to launch a partial system where everybody, investors, exporters, manufacturers, can just go in and put every kind of complaint about I've been here for 2 weeks following up on documents. But I want to say one challenge, and this one you must say update. Look, we must outgrow ourselves. We come and say we are willing to do this to open up the country, for trade. Because the issue here is trade. Remember, percentage of GDP, I said it fell from 28% to 10%. We must open up. We must show we are big brothers. I thank the efforts of the president to say, come on, we cannot stop here to say we are keeping in some fear. But then immediately our people begin saying, suppose you open up for everybody else. Singapore has many times GDP than ours. It opened long time ago, visa-free. Only 15 countries in the world have exemptions because of other issues, like I mentioned, security issues. 185 countries in Singapore. Yet it has like 20 times GDP. We need to confirm that. Look, it pays off to be a big brother. It pays off to get a step forward to say, we cannot live here forever. Look at what happened to Mahatma Gandhi. If you remember the history of textile in India, they were being forced, when they were colonized by British, they were being forced to farm, and all the cotton was moved to London, to Britain. It was processed to textiles. They were forced to buy at a premium. Mahatma Gandhi said, enough is enough. And he asked to boycott the textile from British, and to make their own clothes using, they had no machines, hand woven, some spinning machine. That is what he wore as a sign of resistance. Today, the biggest exports of textile is in India. If you want to know about textile in the world, India is the biggest. Why? Because there was a president.
No, actually, it is China.
It's China, but India is number two.
India is number 2, yeah.
It's number 2. Very big. Why? Because there was a president who decided enough is enough, and the people heeded that president. There comes a time in the history of the world when a president will stand and say, on this issue, I take this stand. And that's what I'm saying. Industrialization in Kenya is real. The third revolution in Kenya about manufacturing, value addition, exports, investments is real. That is the driver of what we have been talking about, jobs, people, wasting their produce from the farms. This is a vision of the president. And this is what is being backed by the minister in trying to say the president is very keen. Going out and telling every governor, please, what is it you have been saying that can add value to your farmers? I'm giving you 250 million. County, bring your 250 million. Phase 1, 500 million. To come and do production, to come and do value addition and exports. We are managing two things. Remember, to avoid post-harvest losses, we have this where the producers coming together. We sell outside, we sell to ourselves, value add and export. That is what's going to help this country going forward.
And even as you respond to Dr.'s comment, I also want to hear from you. I mean, look, we have been debating about the finance bill. Where the public has just concluded giving its input in this bill. And when you look at this bill, it talks about protecting local manufacturers or local industries. And this is going to be done through imposition of levies and taxes on some imported products outside the EAC. And the bill is very categorical that these are outside EAC. And so you'd expect other countries, of course, to retaliate. You impose VAT on our products, we're also going to import on the same. And so this is of course expected to complicate intra-Africa trade. And so even as you respond to Mbai, are we preaching wine or preaching water and drinking wine?
Yeah, certainly, O'Brien, that's where my concern is. And you can see, first of all, let us applaud the president for leading the narrative. Let me use the word narrative. But you see now, the narrative is not enough. We need to see some action taking place. The tax policy doesn't encourage enough this Kenya penetrating the intra-African trade, because of the fact that you find that when the newspapers are busy every day with Gazette notice that, Gazette notice this, tax that. You see, when an investor is looking at foreign direct investment, in fact, I can tell Dr. Mbai they might not get that 10 billion they're looking at, because our newspaper is busy with unstable tax policy. Now the president even made a statement by saying that he is going to increase the taxation from 14% to GDP to 16%, and he didn't tell us in which areas. So people are wondering, what is the next tax? And stable tax policy is important. In fact, you can wonder whether we have a tax policy, because the tax policy is where even the finance bill emanates from. The finance bill is not the tax policy. There should be a tax policy that says you can't do this, you can't do that. So investor says this is the margin upon which you can operate. And at the same time, what I'm looking at, that Kenya was supposed to be more strategic in this. Kenya was supposed to identify the nascent industries, or if you like, the infant industries, and I agree, these are infant industries where we cannot be able to, we must manufacture. We are not going to ensure that there's anything like importation, and then protect them because they are strategic assets. Now, O'Brien, we are here, and thank you very much, Dr. Mbai, for being here. If we are importing maize, we have given contract people to import maize. What are you seeing on the other side?
Before you proceed, allow me just to put something that you have raised into context. You were talking about creating stable taxation regime.
Yes.
And when you look at the finance bill, it has tried to do things because, and I'm going to read part of it. The finance bill proposes to repeal Section 10 of the excise duty, and we know this section. It gives the Commissioner General of the Kenya Revenue Authority powers to increase duties and levies, at will. And so, the bill the bill will clip the powers of the Commissioner General to adjust a specific rate of excise duty once a year to take into account inflation. And number two, the bill, once enacted, shall cushion taxpayers from impromptu increase on the cost of basic commodities that is often occasioned by review of the rate of excise duty to inflation. And so there you see, some attempt to try and create a stable taxation regime.
O'Brien, the much I know taxation, it won't happen because the statement of the president as an executive order, during the interview with the media, he said that we are doing 14%. I will slowly take you towards 16%. Even in parliament, they say that Kenya is the least taxed nation in the region. You see, those statements are not supposed to be taken in vain. People are listening to them and actually taking them in and taking them seriously. The other thing I want to talk about is that before we rush to say we want to bring in, we want to bring that, how prepared are we for the offtake for manufacturing? The preparation for me is important. Are you seeing any mushrooming thing? And I like the separation between foreign direct investment. We also talk about the domestic direct investment. If Kenyan employers, as we speak now, they are thinking that the increment in taxation at the moment will stifle investment into creating more jobs and be able to grow manufacturing. In fact, as I'm aware today, the employers today met the president in State House and they were trying to have a deal with him.
I want you to remain within the context of our conversation.
Within the context of the conversation, I'm trying to say that we need to really ensure that the domestic direct investments is not ignored, because the tax policies we are having now might hurt that. At the same time, the issue of the Africa, like you talk about the issue, when they hear you're overtaxing, we are putting some kind of restrictions to us here, you're adding tariffs there for the ones coming to Kenya, we also do the same. So I'm talking about the issue of the friendliness between the different countries also needs to be done. The other thing is that the foreign policy for Kenya, it's been stated very well that Kenya is open for business. That is a plus. And in fact, I've seen a lot of budget now going into foreign travel. You saw the president going to have a lot of travel across the country. We hope these are also going to open up the trade. And I hope that he's going to accompany with the guy who's doing trade who knows how the trade policies are being done.
Yes.
But with that even standing, it's very critical for us to look at what has made developed countries like Europe and other countries survive. What was mentioned by Whitney about the instability in the country, if Holland has a lot of exportation of milk to Western countries, and they don't want those countries to be stable, so that they continue depending on foreign bodies. So Africa needs to be a little selfish and be in looking and looking at other neighbors to be friendly to them, but also we need to feel African rather than just looking at ourselves as individual countries.
Thank you.
And this unity is important for us to be able to take off and be able to advance our trade.
Yes, Whitney, quickly.
I just wanted to rebut to Dr. Mbai, or rather I just wanted for him to elaborate more. As he talks about foreign direct investments, I would like to ask, how is it going to benefit the locals? Because when you're talking about foreign direct investment, the multinationals can take advantage of the environment in Kenya. So I expected him to say that the technology that will be deployed when the foreign direct investment is being done, how will the technology be beneficial by transferring those skills to the locals? How many people will that sector employ of the local people? And also, as Prof has said, protecting the infant industries. And also, fourthly, I would also want to see that the multinationals could partner with some local industries. So because the local industries have a better understanding of the African market, if it's a multinational from other places, be it the West, they have a better understanding of the African market. How will they partner with the locals so that, because the locals have better understanding?
Very good.
Yeah.
We have come to the point where now we usually do the scorecarding, as it were, because I can see now we need to get out of the studio. Time is well spent. And so the first question that goes to Whitney, How do you rate government effort in increasing trade with Africa?
I would rate it at 2.
2?
Yes, 2.
2 out of 5?
Yes, 2 out of 5, because I do believe that some policies in Kenya, be it the taxes, they're not very friendly, be it the cost of power, be it the cost of fuel, they're not very friendly when people want to invest here so that they can export. But in terms of bureaucracy, I do believe that once the visa, as he said, once the visa restrictions have been set aside, I do believe that that will ease the bureaucracy. And also we've seen that there's some controls in our borders.
Thank you.
Meaning, yes. So
Very
I
well.
would give it a 2.
Daktari, you're in government, definitely. And so how would you rate government effort in increasing trade with Africa in 30 seconds?
You put it very well. Effort, 4 out of 5. Because effort is a very important word.
4 out of 5.
You are doing something, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can say, this is what we are doing, this is what we are doing. You can see the willingness.
What do we need to do to raise this to 5 out of 5?
You see, when you say effort, sometimes you don't give yourself effort 100%, because effort is effort, because it's not an achievement. You are saying, this is a goodwill. This is what the government have shown that we can be able to do. What are we going to do it more? Is simply to move that. You spoke about policies. What is happening today? What is happening the next 2 days will actually give now the legal framework. Because when policies are done, it's going to increase. But one thing we must do, we must protect the local.
Professor, how do you rate government effort in increasing trade with Africa?
I think I'll give it a 2.
2.
Not because I'm copying Winnie, but for me, it's a different reason that Kenya is doing a lot of, if you talk about PR, which is very important. Why I take away the 3 is that we need to come with a very, very clear tax policy, and especially the policies which are Africa friendly, that will see our neighbors that we are trying to embrace them.
Very good. The last question, and I will start with you. How do you rate government tax policies in encouraging Kenya's trade with Africa?
1, the taxation regime in Kenya. First of all, we do not have a national tax policy. It's still in the draft processes, meaning it's not been implemented yet. And also, other than the Inflation Adjustment Act, there's nothing much that says that Kenya is going to have a predictable and stable tax regime. So I would give it a 1.
You give it a 1?
Yes.
What about Prof?
I don't know why we are just tying there, because if you look at the tax policy,
you're also tying with 1.
Yes, it's 1, because if you look at the tax policy for Kenya, I have had, and you can see very clearly that the foreign direct investment is being affected. If you look from the last time when these things being announced, you can see the numbers are not doing very well. I think Dr. Mbai can tell you. Uganda is receiving more. Tanzania is receiving more, Kenya receiving less, and that shows that it's not attracting them enough.
What about Mbai in 15 seconds?
The efforts are 4.
You're 4?
Yes. I like what's happening in Kenya, because the president has, and the government has agreed to put everything on the table. People can discuss about tax issues freely, about the finance bill, because he wants people to understand what he's doing, so that by the time people make a decision, that is it. What the government is doing about the whole tax regime is reorganization.
Asante.
And that's why there's a bit of noise before the things settle down. That's all.
So it's a tie here. You're giving it 4, you're giving it 1, you're giving it 1 as well. Thank you very much indeed. Marie Yambo, let's now get to hear what the people are saying on the scoreboard.
Indeed, O'Brien, and just as our guests have rightfully put it, given their scores on what they think in as far as investment, trade, and all that, particularly in Kenya. Also, we have viewers watching. Jared Namai Kefa from Kibra Lindi in Nairobi says, what the government is doing is opening up doors for foreigners, but what about Kenyan citizens to go to those countries? Are those countries ready to lift visa requirements for Kenyan citizens to visit their country? So that is his concern. Bensar says, hey, I'm watching from the show from Todonyang in north of Turkana, and I'm liking the conversation in studio. Thumbs up to Dr. Ruto's administration for initiating bilateral ties that can enable Kenyans travel freely to other countries. He says, myself, I'm planning to travel to Eswatini and Lesotho through Joburg, because as a Kenyan, now travel, there's no visa, requirement. I'm also waiting for a day when a Kenyan can be allowed to travel to the US visa-free, so I can travel to Miami and Vegas as frequent as I'd wish. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and contributing to the conversation tonight. We'd like to end it there. My name is Marie Yambo. We hope to see you again on the Scorecard next week. O'Brien, it's back to you.
Very good. I think we just want to tell that gentleman that you can visit Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, South Africa, visa-free if you ever want to visit. Well, we must come to the end of this show tonight. Thank you very much indeed for watching the Scorecard. Thank you very much indeed, team, for being with us and, of course, for helping us put this conversation into perspective. Your time is highly appreciated. My name is O'Brien Kimani. We'll see you again on Tuesday, same time right here on KBC Channel 1. Until then, have yourself a good night.